so like giving you versions that aren't too hard to implement, but that work and give you a sense of the flavor. But like, we could have done, we could have done random forests. That's based on decision trees and even better, but it's more work to implement and more complicated to explain. And so we wanted to like try to strike that balance. But you're thinking in the exact right way when you're thinking about, well, is this the right thing to do? Are there other things I could be doing that are better? Yeah, of course there are. And I'm really glad that you guys are thinking about those types of things. And we definitely don't want to penalize that kind of thinking. We want to encourage it. Cool. Any other questions? We'll talk a little bit about today. We're going to do a computer vision case study about auto recognition and how different trade-offs in machine learning play out in that field. So why don't we get started? Cool. I'm actually going to flip my display so it's not mirrored. All right. The sort of theme for today, maybe you already, I was going to make this appear, maybe you already saw it. When we think about machine learning, and we think about taking a machine learning problem, like the spam classification one, like the door detection one, or like your favorite machine learning problem that you thought of, and we think about trying to make it work better. There's sort of 3 strategies that I think of, or that you might try to do to make the algorithm work better. So one is better training data. So that can mean, often it means more training data. There's a well-known result that like, often just adding more data is going to make everything better. Sometimes it means higher quality training data that better matches what you're really trying to do. So sometimes that means more annotation, or it means changing the sensor that you're using, or something like that. And there's a lot of possibilities for this. The second thing is better features. So what are some examples of features you guys are using in the project? Words for the spam filtering, right? So you had like unigram features, but what else did you use? You had one word, but you could also, yeah? What's that? Yeah, sift features. So that's a computer vision example, which we'll actually talk about that today. So you guys aren't using sift features, you're using color histograms in the project, right? Which is okay, but there's, it's hard for me to explain sift features in like, what's that? Yeah. So basically, there's like an active area of research in computer vision is better features, moving beyond just color. And SIFT is one of the buzzwords for one of these types of features. It's based on the gradient of the image. It's looking for like little image patches that look in particular ways in the gradient space. And I'll show you pictures. It's easier to explain with pictures. But it works a lot better than color features, and we'll talk about why that is. What else? What's that? Sentences, yeah, exactly. So like when we use these unigram features and Bayesian spam filtering, we're throwing away all of the structural information that's in a sentence, right? So like if you imagine a sentence like this is spam, and another sentence that says this is not spam, what's the Bayesian naive Bayes thing going to do with that, with each of those? Let's say that there was real triggers, like there was something that said this was real. Maybe I don't know. Like this email is spam versus this email is not spam. And spam, the word spam was a really good feature for telling you that it was spam. What's naive Bayes going to do with that? Yeah. It's going to classify not spam as spam because even though you're saying it's not spam, maybe you're saying it like maybe it's your friend saying, look, this isn't spam. But the spam feature is going to light up, right? There's going to be the word spam, and it's just going to go and be that way. And then you start to have these false positives that get stuck in your spam folder, and emails get dropped, and it's really sad. If only we could use sentence information. If only we could understand, oh, not, OK. And then it would invert it. This is another problem where this comes up is a problem that is called sentiment analysis. So this is a big deal in like reviews. So who's heard of Yelp? This website where you can like if you want to go to a restaurant or you want to find somebody to cut your grass or something, all these businesses have Yelp pages. And people write reviews on Yelp. And an interesting problem that a lot of people care about now is classifying the sentiment of the review. Is it a positive review or is it a negative review? And they use naive Bayes, these unigram models, people call them bag of words, because they're just taking all the words and throwing them in the feature vector without using any of the structural information. So then if you have a sentence in this, in one of these reviews, it said, this restaurant is awesome. And another one that says, this restaurant is not awesome. This is a more realistic example than the spam one. Right? You can imagine, awesome, yeah, that's gonna make it think it's a positive review, but the not is negating it, so then it's a negative review, but naive Bayes isn't gonna take that into account. If we use sentence features, then it could. And there's actually a new paper that came out last year where they did that. Like they used deep learning, we'll talk a little bit about deep learning, to learn to understand negation. And they used the parse structure, and they improved the state-of-the-art results on this sentiment analysis problem, specifically by doing that, by taking into account the sentence structure. Yeah? Yeah, right, good. So in that example, I said, awesome versus not awesome. So naive Bayes could learn, okay, well, awesome means good. Maybe, I'm just guessing that on average, awesome means good, like on our data set. But if you see not underscore awesome, that's what the bigram feature will say, well, that feature means bad. But what's it going to do if I say, like, let's say that I say it's outstanding versus not outstanding? What will naive Bayes do in that sense, in the bigram version? Say it again? Outstanding versus not outstanding. It should do the same thing, right? But what's it going to need to make that inference for not outstanding versus not awesome? What's the training data going to have to look like if you want that to work? Yeah. Does that make sense to everybody? You have to have some. Say it louder.
It needs not outstanding and outstanding as
in the training data. Okay, so it's going to have not outstanding labeled as negative, not a negative review, and outstanding labeled as a positive review, in order for it to make that inference. And then what if it says something like what's a really weird word for positive? Something positive, like
sick.
What?
Sick. Sick.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so it said this restaurant, is that slang? Like, does it mean it's good or bad? This restaurant is sick. Versus, I never heard that expression before. That's good. Versus, this restaurant is not sick. Okay, this restaurant is bad. Okay, so what if the algorithm, like me, has never seen the word sick used in this context before? It's not going to work. But because I know, like, now that you've told me this new thing about the word sick can be used to describe awesome, and then you say this restaurant was not sick. Now I know, right? I know, yeah, okay, it means it's a negative review. So what's going on that naive Bayes is not accounting for is this compositionality. It's called compositionality, right? Not is like some kind of operator that inverts the meaning of the word, whatever the word is, and you can drop in different words. So the bigram feature picks up some of it, but doesn't do it in a general way. And what people seem to be able to do, I won't say the right thing, but something that people seem to be able to do is pick up on this in a kind of general way with very few training examples. And that's, so that's sort of what this other paper I was mentioning actually does. It learns this compositional meaning for not that combines with other words separately. So it would be able to see examples of sick, and then it would generalize, even if it's never seen not sick, it would be able to invert it. It's a sad thing, I don't know if it's a sad thing or not, but it's a result in a lot of computational linguistics, despite what I'm saying, despite these little counterexamples, that very frequently the models that use the parse information don't work as well as like naive Bayes or with bigrams. So, and as a practical matter, you really want to start with like bag of words or bigrams, even though you know that this stuff is going to go wrong. There's this old quote from somebody at IBM who was building some of the first speech recognition systems, which was every time I fire a linguist, my performance goes up. And what he meant by that was that all these models that tried to use it for a long time, and even still today, a lot of these models that try to use the sentence structure work worse than the ones that just use bag of words on lots of data. And there's a few examples of that starting to change now, but it's still, I think it's an open problem in NLP. What is the right way to leverage this data where it doesn't make things worse on average? Cool. So then the last thing we think about, besides better features, is better models. So what does that mean? What kinds of ways can we make our model better? Yeah.
In the case of the doors, you could switch from naive Bayes to like decision tree.
Yeah, so you can try to change the machine learning algorithm that you're using. And you might try to switch to one that better matches your assumptions about the data. So for example, you might think that there's some really good splits that you can do with decision trees that naive Bayes is going to have a hard time expressing. Because it's going to always turn on the features all the time, whereas decision trees will split and let you make these fine-grained decisions at the leaf nodes. And that might work better on some problems. Or you might decide, well, I want logistic regression because I know my features aren't independent of each other, and I know I have a lot of data. So I'm going to switch to that. What else could I do?
Sometimes when you just want something specifically to work, you can like hard code in this edge case that keeps coming up,
Yep.
and that improves your performance.
That's good, yeah. So like there might be something that just always is going wrong. Like you might know in spam classification, any email from my mom is not spam. That's it. And maybe my mom likes to write about these bank accounts in Nigeria. It might really look like spam. But it's not. And I just want to know that all those emails that come from my mom are not going to get into my spam folder. And so I'm going to just throw it out. I'm going to change the way that I think of the problem. And that's a very powerful thing that we do a lot. In computer vision, a big thing that's happening right now is that a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about cameras that give you RGB, pixel values. But now we have this sensor called the Kinect. I think I mentioned it in class before, that gives you RGB-D. So anybody know what the D is? Depth information, yeah. So how do you know how it works?
Well, the Connect 1 is really next to the Connect 1 does a really crazy where it projects a random pattern, seemingly random pattern of like pixels, not pixels, but like dots. And
Yep.
then,
In which spectrum?
infrared.
Infrared. Yeah.
The camera that can sense that. I think the Connect 2 actually does have 2 stereoscopic cameras.
Yeah.
The Connect 1 only had like
Yeah.
one projector.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. So there's different ways to get this information, but like it basically uses the infrared spectrum, so that for every pixel in your image, which is RGB, you'll get D. How far away? The depth information. How far away is this pixel from your sensor? And now you've got a lot more information to use in making your decisions. You might know where the object is. You might know the relative pose of the different pixels. And you can potentially do a lot better at some of these problems because you have this extra information coming in from your sensor. Kind of changing the game, changing the data that you have, and then changing the model of what you think about the data. So whenever you have a machine learning problem, these are the kind of go-to things to make things work better. And we'll go through this, examples of this for object recognition. So this is sort of a summary of different types of problems that fall under object recognition. So a big one is face recognition. So like, who has a camera with automatic focus? A lot of them do these days, right? So what are they doing when they do that? You seen them draw a little box around your face? Yeah? Yeah, so we have really good face recognition now. So good that a little tiny computer with not a lot of CPUs can run it and find faces and use that information to sort of decide where the focus is. There's also a lot of kind of creepy surveillance systems that use this stuff now. So like in airports and stuff, they can actually detect who you are from the image of you in surveillance footage and then light up if it's a bad guy. That's what they say they're doing, light up if it's a bad guy. Facebook has a lot of this too, right? Like, so if you post something on Facebook, it will draw boxes and say, I think this is your mom, or I think this is you. Can you label this person, right? So they're like, doing this to help you organize your images. There's lots of applications for this in robotics, and we'll talk about that a lot. So this is what I'm using object recognition a lot for. You want robots that can find objects in the environment. You want them to be able to manipulate objects. Sorry. So like, figuring out where the arm should go in order to pick it up and then put it down somewhere else. Bringing people things that they want. And there's also a lot of this in autonomous driving, for example. So the Google car project, mostly it uses LiDAR and radar. So LiDAR is like what you guys used for SLAM, these bouncing laser beams off of things. But it also uses vision for a couple of targeted things. Does anybody want to guess what it's using vision for? Stop signs, yeah, that's one of them. What else? Traffic lights, yeah. So it's using computer vision to detect stop signs and traffic lights. It uses LiDAR to figure out where people are and obstacles, and radar to figure out where people and obstacles are. But for some things, they have to use computer vision and like the stop sign tracking. They have these cool videos where like the policeman holds out the stop sign and the car stops, and then they take it away and say slow, and then the car starts to go again. And that's a computer vision system that's running to do that. And then another big application is finding images. So searching. I might go get a drink. Searching for images on the web or in your photography database or something like that. Hey, Betsy, do you mind grabbing a drink? I don't have to stop lecture. Thank you. All right. So what's an image? Sorry, guys. I should have brought one. Thank you so much. So what's an image? What's that? Colored pixels, right. So how might we represent that? Do you want to say more? So how might you represent that? Yeah?
A matrix of
Yeah.
red, green, blue.
Yeah, right. So that's a pretty typical thing that you'll get from a camera. So like when you, for example, to read data off the Kinect, there's this, it plugs into your computer's USB port. A lot of webcams do this too. And then you open up, you write some code that will suck data off of it. And what you'll get, and you can do this, I usually use Python or C or C++ to do this. And what you'll get is a thank you so much, is an array. Thank you. Is an array of colored pixels, RGB. I think I make this appear. And this is sort of how it works, right? So this is sort of the simplest model of a camera. It's a pinhole camera. And you've got some kind of sensor back here in the image plane. So that's the light sensor. And each one, you can think of that as like, there's a bunch of pixels. Each little square is a pixel. And it's going to tell you how much R, how much green, and how much blue it sees of the light that's coming through the world. So like, and then it flips to be upside down. So like, if this was your eye, what are the sensors? What does this correspond to, this back, if it's your eye? The retina, that's right. That's right. And what are the sensors inside there? Everybody know what they're called? What?
The cones and rods.
Yeah, the cones and the rods. Okay, so these are, each of those sensors in the back there is a little cell that's a cone or a rod, and they are sensitive to different frequencies of light. And so they're little neurons and they're firing, and they'll fire a lot when their frequency of light gets turned on. And then that's all wired up into your brain. There's like the visual cortex and all this other stuff that's happening. But at the base of it, that's the way that a camera works and the way that your eye works are pretty similar. So in a camera, the sensor is like light-sensitive transistors that that basically measure the amount of light that they see and then convert that to a pixel value. Okay? And then this is sort of a pinhole model. Really, the pinhole doesn't emit very much light, so you'll put a lens in there. And that basically says I'm going to have a bigger hole that emits more light, but I'm going to focus it all down so that it still gets spread out on that background. So then more light typically means it's easier for the sensor. The sensor doesn't have to be as sensitive to still pick up good values. So that's how we get light from the world into some matrixy thing that we can then process. OK, this is an example of one. Let me turn the light off so you can see it. What's that? Other side. This is a picture. How's that? No. It's sunny today, so it's hard to see. So this is a picture, and each of these, each little square is a pixel with RG and B. Is RG and B the only way to do it? Yeah. Yeah, right. Right. So there's a bunch of other color spaces, HSV, HSL, ... where basically instead of doing RG and B and then combining them, you can have other basis vectors for your image space. And some of these tend to work better in computer vision applications than others. There's discussions and debates about this. RGB is the one that typically will come out by default, and then you can convert it from that to these other spaces. Here's a picture. So like HSV is hue, saturation, and value. There's like a color wheel. And so hue is like all the way around for all the different colors, and then saturation is how bright it is or dark, and then so at the center it's white, at the end it's really dark, and value is also kind of light and dark. It doesn't correspond as well to our intuition, but it tends to be better in computer vision because it's a little more invariant to color. Okay, so there's our matrix, right? Image sub I, so this is a little Python thing, right? Image sub I sub j, whatever it is, maybe it's an 800 by 600 picture, has 3 different values, R, G, and B. And somehow I've got to do something with that. So what might I do with that? So what kinds of things might I want to ask about this picture? Yeah.
If there's a sharp change in color somewhere, you might be able to construct a wall or a window or something like that.
Yeah, right. So I might want to like label things in this picture, like without talking about how yet. Like I might want to label things like the window, or the wall, or what else? Yeah.
Find like key points in the image that if you like took another picture.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, right. So I might want to be like, well, this is distinctive. This thing here is a really distinctive point. And if I get 2 different pictures of this scene, this is a picture from MIT's campus, Lobby 7, and it's a pretty well-known environment. Lots of people come and take pictures of it, and I might want to be able to figure out, like, well, where stitch them together, right? There's some demos of this where they take like well-known monuments where there's lots of pictures on the internet of them, and they do that. They try to find where they overlap, and they make a 3D reconstruction of it out of all of the tourists' photos that they've gotten from like Flickr or something like that. Why else might you want to do that if you're a robot, let's say?
You want to know where you are.
Yeah, yeah. So we were doing SLAM with our LiDAR, right? And we had that magic function that did what was called data association. It said, well, this little pattern of range values is a feature, and I'm going to just assume I somehow know what feature it is and how far away. There's a lot of research on visual SLAM with cameras that uses the same kind of technique to say, well, OK, if I'm a UAV flying around MIT's campus, then if I see that distinctive light hanging there, then I know that where I am in Lobby 7. And if you kind of abstract it away, so like if you have a good enough detector like that, the same SLAM algorithms that you guys coded up work to do visual SLAM. And there's a lot of interesting research about that. They tend to be noisier because the computer vision isn't as good as the LiDAR as a sensor. It's harder to make a visual feature detector that's as reliable as your LiDAR sensor. But there's a lot. That's one of the active areas of research is doing this. OK. Something else a lot of people care about is people, right? So like, where are the people in this picture? Where are they? What are they doing? Question, or are you just stretching? OK. So you might care about this if you're a robot and you don't want to hit them. A lot of work on surveillance these days. I mean, so people want to be able to do this in public places so that they can look for suspicious activity. There's a lot of healthcare applications for this too. So like if you imagine this running in a hospital or something like that, then you might be able to ask quantitatively questions like, how much is the patient getting up and walking around? What are they doing when they're getting up? And you don't have to ask them to remember or anything like that. You can just have a computer vision algorithm that tells you. So how might we solve? So let's say that one of the problems we want to think about is, where are the people? And we've got this pixel matrixy thing. How might we solve it? What would you do? Or you want to find doors like you guys are doing in your project? Yeah. Yeah. So what would that look like?
You have to kind of take a guess at how much space you want to allocate for a person in the picture.
Yeah. Can you talk louder? I think people can hear.
So you have to guess, like, depending on the size of the picture, like how large a person might be in terms of scale.
Yeah.
The size of your window.
Yeah. Yeah. So you might imagine doing. So I think I have a picture of this. Like, you might somehow guess how big you think people are in this picture. And then you might grab this rectangular box and slide it around in your image. And then treat this inside of each, the classification problem that you're going to solve is inside of each of these boxes, is there a person or not? Okay. Why might you, so you could also take the whole image, right? You could say, well, let's just look at the whole image, the whole thing, and tell me, use naive Bayes or use logistic regression or use decision trees to say whether there's a person in the image or not. What do you guys think about that? Yeah.
One thing I think about for either approach, so we don't know how big the people are, right? Like if
Yeah.
a picture of two people, that block wouldn't do anything. And if you're looking at the whole picture, you're also not
Right.
able to tell what size you're
Right.
going to look for.
Right. So a lot of what you do to solve that is you try lots of different size windows. So you might try a big window, you might try a small window, and you might hope that one of them is the right size.
Would it also maybe scale down the image with like seed carving? So
What's that?
scale down the whole image with like seed carving, so we get rid of some of the unnecessary information. And maybe it's a little faster to get through the whole.
Yeah. So people will do that. So they'll just scale. They'll make the image smaller. They'll scale the whole thing down, and then it'll be faster. You don't have to go through all the pixels. I guess I want to just get at why you don't want to just take the whole image in the first place. Like we're introducing this thing, the sliding window. We're going to write a lot of code to slide it around and compute. And we're going to run our classifier. Maybe we'll run 100 or 1,000 times on every single image to make the sliding window work. Wouldn't it be better, instead of doing that, if we just ran it once on the whole image? Why don't we do that? Or why might that make you nervous? What do you think? Yeah.
One reason that you're not going to know where any of the people are if you do it on the whole image.
Yeah, you don't really know where the people are. And it's hard to imagine features that'll be informative about that if you look at that whole image. Especially if you imagine, like, well, here's an indoor scene. Let's imagine some people playing in a park. The pixel values, the colors are going to be totally different, right? Or people on the beach versus people inside, wearing clothes versus not wearing clothes. Or like in the background of the ocean versus the shadows and stuff that's going on inside. If we look at the whole image, there's a lot of distracting information that the computer vision algorithm is going to have a hard time picking out. If we look just inside of one of these patches, if you imagine that you get lucky, and I think it slides around here, you can kind of imagine within that patch, it's almost all person. And so you can imagine that there's less distracting information for the algorithm to pick on. So that's why sliding window detectors are pretty popular. What's another advantage of this? If I use a sliding window detector and it says, oh, the person's there, I get some more information from that. What information am I getting that I wouldn't get from the black box kind of version? Yeah, I know where the person is. So like decision trees are just going to say, well, I think somewhere in this picture is the person. The sliding window is going to say, well, I think there's a person here, right here, in these pixels. And that's often a lot better, because you might want to do tracking, you might want to do activity recognition, you might want to not drive towards them, but drive away from them if you're a robot. So for lots of applications, you want to know where the person is. And so that is a useful thing to know. So that's why sliding window detectors are popular, even though they're a lot more computation sometimes, because you have to run your classifier lots of times. And then you kind of do your this is like the standard machine learning model, right? You have some kind of training set. So for sliding windows, it's going to be these patches labeled with positive or negative examples. And then it's going to be features, which we haven't talked about yet. You guys use color histograms for the project, so you can imagine that, or you mentioned SIFT. We'll talk about that a little while. And then you do some kind of optimization. And we talked about that last couple of classes, right? SVMs or logistic regression or decision trees or something. And you can get, here I put P of person given the image patch, but if you use a discriminative model like decision trees, you might get something different, just a classifier, some function that takes in the image patch and says, yes, a person, or no, not a person, right? So it doesn't have to be P. OK. So what about features? What features could we use?
A human's most likely to be upright,
Mm-hmm.
looking for something vertical that stands out from the background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you could kind of look for something vertical that stands out from the background. So a lot of people do like, so that phrase, stands out from the background. How would you do that?
Like sharp changes in color.
Yeah, that's right. So what people do is they look for stuff that stands out from the background, and mathematically, when you've got this matrix, that corresponds to sharp changes in color. They look at the gradient of the image. So like here's a really nice example. It's really smooth. There's not a big gradient over here. But then all of a sudden, boom, right? When I go from there to the pant legs, I get a big gradient for what's changed. And if I I can kind of see, okay, so there's something called edge detection, which looks for this, and you can kind of maybe you've seen. I don't have a slide for it in this talk, but like it basically tries to draw the edges around. And then you could kind of imagine looking for like a shape like that. How might you do that? If you've got, let's imagine that we've got a silhouette of a person that we've abstracted. How might you decide that the silhouette is a person? Is like you said, long and thin.
Because you could have a bunch of training data on what a human looks like our arms and the head.
Yeah, right. So maybe I have a bunch of trained data, and I've somehow learned. So how am I? What are my features though? Like if I'm going to do that. The edges. Yeah. So like so you can imagine maybe having like this basis set of edges, and then you see how different which ones light up. You know, these different patterns of how the edges are oriented in space, and then it learns to look for these little sub-image patches that match particular pattern. And it's actually near in the computer that the human vision system does this. We have a lot of detectors for edges, like in different orientations, in the local in like our visual cortex, right? Like so we have detectors that light up for these different little patches in space. You can look at inside of like mouse brains and stuff and see this happening. And then these are driving kind of the higher level thing. We're talking about a lot of the ways that these get extracted is the histograms, right? So what's a histogram? Right, right. So a histogram, yes. So like if I see, let's imagine like a color histogram, right? So for each bin of colors, because these are continuous, or they're 255, depending on your resolution, right? How many megapixels you've got. But like let's say there's 0 to 255 values for R, G, and B. That's a lot of individual features if you wanted to treat each R value as its own thing. So typically what you'll do is bin them. You'll say, well, from R value 0 to R value 20, that's one bin. And then R value 0 to 10 is, I guess I'll match what I got on the slide, right? So 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and then sort of do it, count this up until you get all the different values. And so you're reducing the dimensionality of your data. And so you've got a histogram that says, well, there's 10 pixels in bin 1 and 20 pixels in bin 2 and 0 pixels in bin 3. In my space. And then I can treat that as a word, a visual word kind. People call them visual words sometimes, where that has to be a feature that I'll assign weight to. So if I see bin 3, which means, let's say that means there's a lot of green, then my classifier might learn, okay, this is maybe grass. My grass classifier will light up, or not. A lot of computer vision feature spaces are done in this way. They're not always color. They're sometimes looking for edges and these different little patterns of edges. But this idea of a histogram is how we go from like, well, there's this scary matrix of pixels and I don't know what to do with it, to something that a machine learning algorithm can actually do something with. Okay? So this is an example of a color histogram for this picture, which is what you guys are using in the project. So like, this is like as green goes from 0 to 255. So this picture has a lot of green in the middle, and there's some red in the kind of low red space, and there's some blue, because that's the blue sky in the picture. A different picture will have a different pattern in color space. So what's wrong with color? We've already kind of talked about it, because we've suggested gradient-based features and edge-based features. Why don't we just use color? Yep. Yeah. Right. 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 So if you imagine this scene in a cloudy day, there's not going to be very much blue. But if you want, are those cows? If you want a cow detector, you don't want your algorithm to to make this work. Your algorithm is going to require, cloudy days, winter days, because what if there's snow there, or summer days, and dot, dot, dot. Or let's say you've got a window right around the cow. What's it going to do with brown cows versus black and white cows versus, I don't know, different colors for cows, yellow cows, blue cows. There's different cow colors, and your algorithm is going to break based on that. So this is an example of mugs that suffer from this problem. It was like, I just typed mugs into Google image search. This was like the first picture, right? So if I'm using color histograms, mugs like these are going to be a problem, where they're all different colors. One's going to light up in red space, and one's going to light up in blue space, and the yellow one's going to be somewhere in between. And my algorithm is going to be like, these are totally different objects because they're totally different features. And it's either not going to work, or I'm going to need a lot of training data of all kinds of different colored mugs to try to make it happen. Or I might get confused. So like, if I'm using just color features and I look at this mug and I compare that to a lemon, what's it going to do? What's that? Looks the same. Yeah, it looks the same. So it's not going to. It's going to get confused. So color seems really nice on the face of it, but it has issues with generalization, because similar objects, for lots of applications, the color diversity is very high, even if it's the same object. People are lots of different colors. They wear different clothes, and even from day to day, the same person's color histogram is going to look very different, depending on what they put on to wear that day. Here's another example. I don't know if you guys have seen this before. So A and B. Same color or different color? I see some people who've seen it before. So do they look the same or they look different? They look very, very different, right? The first time I saw this illusion, I was like, this can't be true, right? A and B have to be different colors. But if you kind of make them take away the context, and I haven't changed the color, it's the same image down there. You can see the pixel values are exactly the same, right? So I'll do it again. Bring back the shadow and the lighting of this object in here. Now they look different, but I'm just taking away. It's kind of weird. It kind of happens gradually as you take away more. And suddenly they become the same color. But the pixel values, again, are completely identical. So even if you imagine that it's the same color all the time, right? Depending on whether the sun is shining today or whether it's a rainy day, or whether your lights are on or your lights are off in the lecture hall, your algorithm might break, because our eyes are really magical, right? Like we can correct for that kind of thing in ways that we don't yet know how to make our computer vision algorithms do. And so there's also things like distortion. So like my object, like maybe I've got training data of it dead on, but then when I'm recognizing it, it might be at a different angle, and so that might look very different. Different colors there might be different areas of it on my retina that are important. Aspects. So again, like, as I turn this thing, it's a circle, but now it looks like a line. This is the problem when you go from 3D world to a 2D image. You're losing a lot of information. And deformation, right? So like, this is just a little stick drawing of a person, but making the point that like, well, maybe I've got a really good recognizer for a person standing like this, but then once you start letting them do all the different things that people do, it can become very difficult to recognize all of those different types of behaviors. And so what we want is algorithms that can be robust to this type of thing. And occlusion, of course. So like, a really good feature for a mug is the handle. But if the mug is turned so that the handle's behind it, I can't use that awesome feature. Right? So even if I've got something that says, well, a person is tall and narrow, but now I'm like lying on a couch, all of a sudden I'm not tall and narrow anymore. I've changed. Or a mug's got a handle, and I should look for that handle, but now the handle's turned, so it's behind me, and so I can't see the handle anymore. So what people do is to address some of these issues, not all of them, but like this color issue, is we talked about already. They look at histograms in gradient space, and there's different versions of these. There's like a cottage industry in computer vision. Like I think SIFT was what kicked it all off. So somebody thought really, really hard for a really long time and came up with this algorithm called SIFT, which looks for these edge-based features, basically looks for those little kinds of lines in like an 8x8 image patch. And then there's different versions. So like surf is faster than SIFT, but maybe less accurate to compute. And HOG is what people use now for state-of-the-art applications, histograms of oriented gradients. And it's just a little bit more principled than version of SIFT to get that same kind of information. So basically for each pixel, maybe you'll do like an 8x8 image patch or something. For each pixel in the patch, you compute the gradient direction and the magnitude by just looking at its neighbors. And then you bin the direction. So the gradient could be a number of different discrete directions. And then you bin the directions of all the different pixels, and you return the most frequent direction. So like a picture of it is going to be like this. So here it's it's like these little lines I drew over here, or the brightness in the middle picture. The brightness of the line corresponds to what's where the gradient direction is the largest. So you can kind of see the legs of the person in the middle there, where it's going up. And in the bottom, you'll see the horizontal, like the kind of background scene standing out. And then you can kind of see the arms happening, right? In this paper, and then this is the features, and each of these features, so it could be like, each of these features could be one of 8 different values. And then it learns positive and negative feature weights. So when this kind of algorithm trained, I think it's trained on, people usually use SVMs. I don't actually remember which algorithm they use to train this, but this is showing the ones that get the positive feature, the features, the gradient orientations that get positive feature weight according to the algorithm. So what does that look like? That third one there. Kind of like a person, yeah? So like it's kind of learned, okay, this kind of tall, thin silhouette, like you were saying, these are the ones that get positive feature weight for being a person. This is kind of the negative components, the stuff that doesn't look like a person. So like weird stuff and stuff in the middle and stuff like that. So it's kind of learning this silhouette idea in the image patch. And this is like something that people use a lot to get HOG types of features, what they call them, histogram of oriented gradients, to get good performance in computer vision. 7,000 some citations for this one. So I also wanted to mention, who's heard of deep learning? I guess we talked about it, maybe most of you guys have heard of it. So there's been a lot of work in computer vision, kind of going back to this slide here, like lots of these different features where people basically think really hard, they take a bunch of derivatives and stuff and come up with features. A new thing that's happening in the last few years in computer vision is applying deep learning to computer vision. So there's a system that came out of Google. Andrew Ng and his students did this, and they basically took, maybe before we talk about, like to train this, what do you need? To train a model like this one? What's that? A data set. What's a data set going to look like? Yeah, labeled. So what did I have to do? What do I have to do to get that? What could you do if you wanted a person detector? What's that? Yeah, what do I have to label to train a thing like this? Let me go back to this picture. So like, let's say I've got, so like I can go. This picture. Okay, I can get lots of these pictures, right? Like I can just go mine Flickr and Google and Wikipedia. I can get lots of these pictures like that. Can I use those pictures without labels to train a model like the HOG one? No. What do I have to label on a picture like this if I want to train a HOG model?
Where in the image like a person is.
Yeah, right? So if I want a person detector, I've got to take a lot of these images, which I can get a lot of these images, and I got to label all the people. I got to draw a box around every single person in the image if I want a good person classifier. That's a lot of work. And we'll talk in the sort of next section of this lecture some of the different approaches people have taken to getting these types of labels. So one of the promises of deep learning was like, well, we don't want to do all this labeling. We just want to give our algorithm lots and lots and lots of pictures, unlabeled. We're just going to download pictures from the internet. And this was Google. This was done at Google. I found out at Google, you can write a program, and you can run that program on the whole internet in 10 minutes. Isn't that cool? This is actually 10 years ago that they first found this was possible. It's probably less now. This is because of their MapReduce cluster, right? You can, for example, you want to find how many times on the whole internet does people use the word cat, right? You can write a little Python program, and you can send it to Google's cluster, and it'll MapReduce it. And 10 minutes later, it'll tell you how many times. It's mind-blowing. The computational resources they can bring to bear. So this work was done at Google, where they have the whole internet. So in order to make Google's search work, I don't know if you've thought about this or not, but what they have to do is download the whole internet. They do this. So inside of Google is the entire internet. They can't go behind firewalls and login pages and stuff, but everything that they search on the internet, they downloaded so that they can count up how many words appear on how many web pages. And then when you type in cat, it's doing this index thing, right? So it's looking up how many times cat appeared and then sending you to those web pages. So when Google's crawling your website, they're downloading your web page to their servers, and then they're counting up all the words that appeared where, and they're doing all that link stuff and making search happen. Same thing for images. So Google has lots and lots of images to make image search work. So to do this, what they wanted to do was basically look at all the images on the internet. They use 10 million. There's actually, that can't be all the images Google has, but they use 10 million images that Google made available to them, of 200 by 200 pixel images. Maybe they cropped them or something like that to make them all the same size. 1,000 machines, 16,000 cores for 3 days, and they crunched for a long time with no labels at all. They just took those images, and that's it. And they used deep learning. So this is kind of a neural-based model, this hierarchical model, to kind of think really hard about these images. And its job is to come up with features. So again, there's no supervision. It's just trying to find features that explain the data on the internet. And this is like a visualization of some of the features that it came up with. OK? So what does this look like? A person. It's like your existential internet face, right? So if you look at the weights in sort of grayscale of the model learned at the top level, looks like a person. This one's harder to see on my slides. It looks better. Maybe I'll mail the link out after class. What's that? It's a cat. Yeah, it's the head of a cat. So again, like this. See, I don't know if you guys can see. This is the nose. The ears are up there in the corner. And there's eyes. It looks a lot. I'll send the link out. You can actually. I'm looking at my laptop now, but you can see the eyes and the nose, and there's some whiskers. And this is the model learned this. Isn't it creepy? They're both creepy. No, the left, yeah, it's creepy, right? Like it just looked at all these images and it thought for a really long time, and it came up with these features that it's this multi-layer thing. So like they actually, if you read the paper, there's like it learned eye features, and then it learned that the eyes are like this typical location in the head, in order to do recognition. And they got really good recognition results when they use these features in a supervised way to do person detection and cat detection, and other types of examples too. Another example of this deep learning stuff, we'll talk about this more in the next module when we talk about sequential decision making, but there's another deep learning result. Who's heard of Atari? Space Invaders. Pac-Man, you guys all did Pac-Man, that was an old Atari game. I don't know if Pac-Man's up here. Pong, right, so Pong is over there on the left. Breakout, Space Invaders, that's a submarine game. I don't know this game. They used deep learning to learn how to play Atari. So the input, the feature space was the picture that the Atari game puts on the screen. The action space is like the 9 joystick moves you can do on Atari, up, down, left, right, diagonal, and there's a couple buttons. And the reward function is the score. So you get a real number for the game score. And the deep learning algorithm learned it learned to do things like, in Space Invaders, it learns to like hide behind those things on the bottom are like shields that absorb the bullets that they're shooting at you. So it learns to like hide behind them for the shield when the bullet's coming down, then move out and shoot. So it's learning visual features for all this in the same kind of algorithm. So it's really exciting because you don't have to spend as much time engineering these features. But maybe not clear how, there's a lot of hype about it now. There's I guess a lot of humanity is about fads. And AI is no different. So like there's a deep learning fad that's going on that's driven by a lot of these cool results. And sort of remains to be seen how far it's going to take us and whether it's going to solve all the problems or not. I think not. I think there's going to be more for us to do. OK, so that's kind of features, all the way down to like state-of-the-art methods like deep learning to learn features, instead of you having to think hard and then write down what you think are good features. So what about training data? So here's this picture. So what do we say we have to do in order to use our hog stuff on this picture? What do we have to do? We already said it. Label all the people, right. So there's people doing this. This is an active area of computer vision research. There's lots of these labeled data sets. This is a picture from one of these data sets called LabelMe, where people on the internet can label your pictures. And this is what they did. And their job is, the job of the LabelMe people, annotators, you can actually go to LabelMe and label some pictures yourself if you want to do that. And the job of the LabelMe data set is to just label all the people. So you can see they're putting these very nice tight bounding boxes around the people. They got their hands here. The light. They did, see how they did that one? What's that? What do you think the star is? What's that? Yeah, in the triangle. What do you think these things are? Where are they from? What's that? People playing jokes. Yeah. Yes, that's right. It's from people playing jokes. So some of them are really good, right? So like you have some, like this is very nice. Like you've got this person, you even got their hands. You've got these random arrows. That's kind of bad. You've got the lighting fixture. You've got the windows, right? You've got people labeling the writing on the wall and individual words on the wall. And it's a pretty big data set. So you can actually, there's a lot of really interesting work that uses this as training data. And you can imagine having some kind of filtering rating system. So like if you, some of your time is spent looking at other people's annotations and saying yes, no, yes, no. You know, maybe the star would be a no. I tried to find one that had some good ones and some bad ones. And then use this to train your models. And there's actually lots and lots of these data sets. So this is, so one of these are just kind of a list, Caltech 101 and 256. So they picked 101 different object categories, like mugs and cars and stuff. And then they collected picture airplanes, soccer balls still up. And they took pictures of these objects and said, this is a picture of an airplane. Pascal, so they picked 20 different classes and realistic scenes. ImageNet, Sun, you know, lots of stuff. And a lot of people present results using these data sets. But there was this paper that came out a few years ago in 2011 that looked at data set bias. So what do you think that means? What makes you nervous about this picture? Like just from what I've shown, like especially think about those first two. You know, 100 object categories, 20 object categories. Yeah.
The first three are perfect.
What's that?
The first three are perfect, like they're well balanced.
Yeah, they're really nice and they're well bounded and they're cropped, but there's only 20 different categories. These ones and the LabelMe ones, there's a lot more noise, a lot more things going on in them. So this paper, what they did was they had this little quiz on the first page for computer vision researchers to take. So basically, so your job is given 3 images from like that top one. It's like a picture of a pizza and looks like a cell phone or something, and a vase. And your job is to name the data set that the picture is from. Okay? And it turns out that computer vision researchers are really good at this. Okay? I'm not. I don't know the data sets as well. But like they did this. They had computer vision researchers take this test. And they're really good at predicting the data set. They get it 75% correct. Okay? So what does that make you think?
Strong biases are different.
Yeah, the data sets look really, really different from each other. There's strong biases between the different data sets that are sort of out there for computer vision. So what do you think the next thing they did was? What suggests itself from this test that you might do? Yeah? Yeah. So, but there's still, yes. So that's something people do, and that is one of the things that they did. There's something they did first it's even snarkier. They're still looking at data set bias. So they saw how well people do on this task. What else might you want to know? To measure bias. What's that? Yeah, that's right. So the next thing they did was they wrote a program, a computer vision, a classifier, just like we did a person detector or something. And the job of the program is to say, does it do this? Name that data set. OK? And it turns out that it works. OK, computer programs are able to autonomous, they're using different features. So like HOG 2x2. And as they give, so here the recognition performance, it goes up to like 35% accuracy. That's not awesome, but it's still way better. Chance is down here. It's way better than chance, right? And they're using, so the HOG 2x2 features are the best features using different feature spaces to predict. So again, indicating that there's a lot of bias in the different data sets. And kind of scaring you, because a lot of computer vision is building on this basis, right? Like a lot of the results are saying, well, this is how well I do on Caltech 101 or something. This is showing a confusion matrix. How much do I confuse one with the other? So the diagonal is what you want to be 100% of the time. Every time that it is Caltech 101, I say it's Caltech 101. Well, I actually really, in this way, it's the opposite. Like you hope that the data sets are sufficiently diverse, all of them, that it doesn't work well. So the fact that there's a strong diagonal shows that it's good at predicting. And then this is what you said. So what they're doing, so here in every one of these, the thick line is training and testing on the same data set. They're using a test set. So we talked about this before, right? Like, so you train on some examples. In this one, they trained on some examples from ImageNet and tested on other examples, but they're both from ImageNet. And then these other ones are training on different data sets. So like this one in the corner here, what does that make you think? The purple line. What is this telling us about this one? So it's training, it's testing car on Caltech 101. So that was one of the ones that had 101 different classes, right? And it's predicting how accurate the car classifier is. When trained, so the legend's over here. So the purple line is training and testing on Caltech 101. Distinct images, but all data from that data set. And these are the other data sets. Training on the other data sets, testing on Caltech 101 cars. Yeah?
Saying that Caltech is really, really good at identifying cars.
No, Caltech cars really, really different from the other things.
Yeah, that's right. So it's almost the same thing, right? So Caltech data set is somehow really easy to recognize cars in, but maybe not representative of how cars look in some of these other data sets, some of which are much larger and much more diverse. So if we've been spending a lot of time in computer vision thinking about Caltech 101 cars and stuff and saying, oh, look, I get state-of-the-art results on Caltech 101, that may not mean very much when I start to go. So for example, LabelMe is that scene from the other one, like that's the much more diverse and maybe real-looking data set. So it's sort of saying it's not very representative. So this was sort of this work is still kind of making waves in computer vision. The idea that like their data sets, that we need to think about the data set bias and how to collect larger data sets. And really what the problem is that computer vision needs to solve. Because what happens a lot is like a data set comes out and then a lot of people working on that data set. And it shapes the field. It shapes the research that's done. Because it's easy, it's data, it's already there, it's labeled. Somebody did a lot of hard work. And a lot of progress is enabled by that. There's chains and chains of papers that use these data sets and compare and do things like that entropy thing we were talking about in the decision tree. They make little tweaks with different algorithms, just like the one that I was talking about at the beginning of the class. And they show, oh, I get 1% better on this data set. And in many ways, that's how we make progress because of that process. But there's also dangers, as we're talking about. As we also, it was very topical, the Google Food Trends article I sent out. Another example where the data fell out of sync and then they had to fix it. So sort of bias in training data. Sort of how should we collect our data? How should we collect our data? What should we do? Yeah?
Take images from multiple scenarios
Yeah, we want diverse data sets to try to fix this. I think something else we can take away from it, which is something we're doing in our work, which is that, well, look, even though Caltech 101, like if you sort of look at the absolute performance on this, that's a pretty good card classifier, if that's really what you care about. If you really want a Caltech 101 card classifier, then it's, you don't want to be using LabelMe. You don't want diversity, right? So the other piece of that, like if you want diversity, you need diverse images. But if you don't need diversity, you might be far better off collecting your own data and getting this awesome performance on that subset that you really, really care about. And that's something we're doing in my lab right now. So like we're kind of recognizing, I thought that we needed object recognition. I thought that we needed to do glass detection or cup detection generally for all types of cups. But what we're realizing is that for a robot, like it doesn't need to do all cups. It just needs to do your cup. Like your robot only needs to know about your cup. It doesn't need to know about all the other cups in LabelMe or whatever. And then we switch back into the Caltech 101 case, legitimately. Like this is actually good enough to do what we want. So that's one of the things my group is working on research-wise right now, is trying to make it so that you can make a classifier for your cup. And then the robot can pick it up and manipulate it and do stuff for you. All right. So there's no one answer to this. It depends. It depends on what you're doing and why we're doing it. I gotta turn the lights back on. I think it's dark, too dark. That's like the worst possible configuration, isn't it? There we go. All right. So then the last thing we're going to talk about sort of technically is different models, right? So we talked about features all the way from color histograms to deep learning. We talked about training data and this kind of snarky paper, an unbiased look at dataset bias. I think it's right here. An unbiased look at dataset bias. So now we're going to talk about different models and some of the approaches people use for that. So we already talked about sliding windows instead of looking at the whole image. So parts-based models are like, well, don't make a whole person detector. Make a head detector and an arm detector and a leg detector, and then see how they kind of fit together. Have different layers of your model, and then combine them in order to make a person detector. And this was done by Pedro Feltenswab. He's at Brown in the School of Engineering and also in CS. And this is how you get state-of-the-art results for these problems right now, is you use these kinds of parts-based models. So this is sort of showing how it works, where there's like the overall histogram, but then it's trained separately from these individual parts for the arms and the legs. And then it learns the geometric relations of them. So in the image up there, you can see it's labeling where the different parts of the person are and stitching them together. Yes?
So does that mean that there's no one unified data set of people, it's just the data set that
Good question. Right. So what's the default way to train this? If you want to do this fully supervised, what do you need? It's what you said. Yeah, so I've just imposed, if I want to do this without playing tricks, I have to go, not only do I have to label my people in my training set, I have to label their arms and their hands and their heads. I've got to do a lot more labeling. So what Pedro showed, is that you can actually get around this by playing tricks. Okay? What tricks do you think you could play to not have to do that? Yeah.
Give it only people and let it pick up on the subparts
Mm-hmm.
in like unsupervised ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. So like it's this sort of game of pretend, right? If only I had a person detector and I could draw those boxes, then suddenly it becomes a lot easier to imagine drawing other boxes around the arms and the legs. At least I know what box, what the sub box is for drawing that stuff. And in the other direction, if let's just somehow pretend that I had arm detectors and leg detectors and head detectors, well, maybe I could use those subdetectors to make a person detector, right? This is kind of like SLAM, right? If only I had a map, then I could localize myself within it. And if only I could localize myself, then I could make a map. And you kind of switched back and forth between those two modes. And we did math to kind of factor it. This kind of pattern of algorithm is very common when we do unsupervised learning. It's like instead of, you basically pretend you have what you only wish you had. And then you act as if you had it to update the other thing that you wish you had. And then you use that to update the first thing. And you just keep jumping back and forth in this space. It's question?
Yeah, so I mean, in the part-based models,
Mm-hmm.
even after we've developed like a recognizer for the different parts
Yeah.
of the body, we would then need to write a whole other algorithm that would then combine those in a way that would recognize the human, right? And wouldn't that like put extra spots for there to be errors on each step of the algorithm? But our end result,
Yeah.
we want a person detector, and we need to put together our arm detectors and our leg detectors to get.
Yeah, so you have to know, and actually, like, they're doing this, right? So this thing here is saying this is where I think each of those detectors should go within the patch that's going to be the person. So that's one of the parameters of the model, actually, is not only is it learning to make an arm detector, but it's also learning where the arm detector is going to go, where it should fire, typically, from the data.
I think the part-based model are more realistic than the whole thing if you are detecting the people, because sometimes they are overlapping with each other, so you can only see a part of the body, but you can still recognize you.
Yeah, right. So like, if you actually have these part-based models, it can be more robust to occlusion, because maybe I can't even see one arm, or I'm like this, but I could still see the other arm, right? Like something is going to be showing. Something's going to like trigger the model to actually fire anyway. So that's another reason. That's sort of why I think that they work so much better than the whole body model. Yeah.
So this is more accurate, but it's more computationally efficient than.
Training takes a long time
Yeah, because you really do like.
because you have to do this stuff. So this is sort of the algorithm, right? If we had the model parameters, we could pick the parts. If we had the parts, we could learn the model parameters. And I've got to jump back and forth. So each of these, inside the inner loop, is decision trees. Usually it's SVMs or something, right? But like inside the inner loop is your decision tree, your logistic regression classifier, or your naive Bayes classifier. And the outer loop is just jumping back and forth. So you're doing this really long training process to make this happen. And this sort of pattern, if you've seen EM, or if you take machine learning, you'll do EM, expectation maximization. But SLAM is like this too, this kind of jumping back and forth. Pretending you had one thing, and then acting as if you know it, and then switching to the other thing. And people do this a lot. OK. So that's sort of the machine learning mantra, right? Better training data, not in this order, I guess, but like better training data, better features, better models, right? So this last example is a better model. Let's not just do the whole thing. Let's do a parts-based model to try to improve performance. This is some results. So to finish up, I kind of wanted to sort of think outside of this box of object recognition a little bit. So we've really talked about, like, OK, we want to do a person detector or a car detector or a cat detector. So here's an image. Let's draw a box around that thing in the image. What else might you want to do? Let's say you wanted to plug this into something. What else? Like, is that enough? That's enough for a lot of things, but not other things. So like, I wanted you guys to like brainstorm a little bit. Like, what other problems are out there? And what additional information do you need to solve them? So like we've talked about robotics and surveillance and image search and stuff like that. So pick one. In the back?
Other problems that machines are bad at really good at recognizing objects, like visually.
Yeah.
But it's really difficult to kind of just explain to a computer how to do it. That's what machine learning. So you're using like language.
Yeah.
Like trying to understand language. Is also really difficult for computers, but you can kind of give them like one new example that says like these.
Yeah.
These are like nice sentences.
Yeah.
What language something's written in. You do a bunch of language.
Can you talk a little louder?
If you give like a computer
Yeah.
sentences in different languages. You think this is French, this is German.
Yeah.
This is, English, and they can try to auto it in language.
Yeah, so, okay. So like, if you wanted to recognize which language somebody was speaking. Somebody actually did a thesis at Brown in Eugene's group pretty recently that did a version of this. It looked at English text written by people who were not native English speakers but had learned English during school or something, or had, later in life, basically. And by looking at their texts in English, it was able to predict their original language. Yeah. And the reason they were doing this was it was part of, people were trying to learn English better, right? And they would make patterns of errors based on their native language. So they would use, a common thing is dropping articles, for example. Like a lot of languages don't use words like the and a and an, which English has. They just don't have them. And so people who are learning English will sometimes not use those words because they're used to a language where it doesn't have them. And there's sort of other typical patterns, and the algorithm was learning to do that. But I was still sort of imagining like the computer vision space. Like if we say, okay, we've got object recognition and it's solved, what else do you need in order to make a robot do something?
Well, if you're trying to make a self-driving car or something like that,
Yeah.
you see a person standing by the side of the road. You might also want to infer, like, it's good to know that the person is standing by the side of the road. But you might also want to know information about, like, do they look like they're about to
Right.
get across the road?
Right. Right.
So, like, something about that.
So you want to predict the future. Yeah. No, I'm not making a joke. You want to predict the future. It's true. You want your algorithm to be able to like look at where things are now, know there's a person there, and then also know what's going to happen next. And that's a thing that's happening in robotics. I actually have that next. This is an example of a robotics paper that was about this. It's not driving. It's in the house. So it's predicting, in this example, the person is holding a mug, a glass. And it's predicting, because it knows it's a glass and it knows the pose of the person, this heat map is showing, well, I think they're going to lift the glass up and go in there, take a drink. It's trying to predict the future. Right? So a car might want to know this so that it cannot hit the person, yield, let the pedestrian have the right of way. A household robot might want to know this because it might want to deliver something. Like if it knows you're going to get a drink, then maybe it should get ready to after you're done to take it away and put it in the sink. Or if it knows you're going to put something in the refrigerator, it might want to go and open the refrigerator for you because you've got your hands full and you can't do it. So predicting the future is a big deal. A lot of people worry about surveillance. So like there's this standard scenario of the bag drop, right? So someone's going to, what we're worried about with after 9/11 and stuff is you're going to take your suitcase, drop, and walk away. That's what they want to know is going to happen. And so they're sort of looking at people who might be candidates for these types of actions. What else?
If you recognize an object, you might want to pose estimation to
Yeah.
figure out how you should handle it.
Yeah, I think I have this up on, maybe you saw it go here. So pose estimation, right? I know there's a mug with these pixels, but if I actually want to move my arm, if I'm a robot, and I want to move my arm to pick up the mug, I've got to know exactly where it is so that I can move my arm in that space and actually make that pickup happen. What motor command should I send to do this? And this is something we're doing in my lab right now. If you come by my lab sometime, you can see me trying to make the robot do this in a dead reckoning kind of way. So like we know where the mug is. Let's try to send the arm to the right place so that it picks it up. And also in an active way. So we've got, it's called visual servoing. There's a camera in the arm. And it basically does this patrol thing until it sees the mug, or the thing, in the right place. And then goes down and picks it up. In an active, closed-loop kind of way. Yeah, I actually can show a video of that. So we shot this a couple days ago. My student John shot this. So you can see the hand up there. It's picked it up. I'm going to zoom ahead. So it's basically got a camera inside the gripper looking down at this thing on the table. And it's running a PID controller, so it's trying to localize this guy, this little chess piece thing, and then move the gripper around so you can see it slowly moving back and forth. We have it tuned to be very slow right now. And then once it thinks it's got it, it goes down and tries to pick it up. Yay. So that's manipulation. What? What's that? Oh yeah, it drops it. It does it again. It's just in the loop. All right, so that's sort of, I'll finish there, I guess. There's richer sensors and stuff like that. So again, cheating by having connects and stereo cameras and cameras that move. But the thing I want you to take away from this whole thing is this list of stuff, right? Better training data, better features, better models. So when your algorithm doesn't work, those are the 3 things you think about. Thanks.